Hey everybody, today I want to show you how to create an amazing solar eclipse time-lapse video. For this workflow, I will be using photos taken from an ASI camera. If you used a DSLR, then you'll actually have a much easier time, and I'll explain what to do along the way. But let's start off here in PixInsight. We'll go to File, Open. We'll navigate to our directory with all of our FITS photos, which you should have copied over by now, and we'll just double click on any one of them. The reason I want you to open up one of your FITS files is to confirm it's still black and white, because technically these photos have not been debayered yet. You can see there's kind of a weird grid pattern along the image. That's what we have to do manually here in PixInsight. And for those that are shooting with a DSLR, you don't have to worry about this. Just load up all of your raw photos into Lightroom or Camera Raw. It will automatically do the debayer for you. You can apply whatever edits you want to the photos and then save them all as JPEGs. At that point, you can skip ahead in the video and pick up with us when we create our time-lapse video. But if you did use an ASI camera, the first thing we need to do, as I said, is debayer the photos. We can do this by going to Process, All Processes, and look for Debayer. That should bring up this window right here. And the next thing to do is click on Add Files. This is where we're going to load in all of our FITS files that we captured with our camera. I only have like 20 here just for demoing, but ideally you'd have at least 240, if not upwards of 350 images. The more footage you have, the longer your time-lapse will be, and the smoother it will be as well. Once you've loaded in all of your solar eclipse photos, the next step is to choose an output directory. I'd recommend you click on the folder icon, go to your FITS directory, and then make a new folder called Debayered. I've already done that, but once you've created your Debayered folder, you can select it and then choose that as the directory. Now all of your photos will be saved in a folder where you can find them. The only thing left to do is click on the circle button, and it will now go through and debayer your images. When that's complete, you can close out of the debayer window, and now would be a good idea to take a look at our photos. For this, we're going to use the Process Explorer on the left and choose the blink tool. If you don't have the blink tool here, you can always find it under Process, All Processes, and look for blink. Next, we'll click on this little folder icon, navigate to our Debayer directory, and select all of our debayered images. When it loads them up, it's probably going to overexpose the photos, so you might want to turn off this button right here, which is the Compute Auto STF. That will turn off any sort of image adjustments. I'd also recommend you change 0.05 to 0.00, that way it goes through these a lot faster, and then we'll click on the play button. And I only have a few images loaded in, but you can still see how they're kind of jumping around. That's what we need to fix with an auto alignment tool. But what I'd like you to do is just go through here and find one that's centered up nicely. Hopefully they're all pretty close, but maybe image number 8 is pretty well centered. The point here is that we're choosing a reference frame. So you want to make a note of whatever photo looks to be centered up to you. I'm going to go with image number 8. We can close out of the blink tool. And now we're ready to do our auto alignment here in PixInsight. This is really going to speed things up. So we'll go to Script, Utilities, and look for FFTRegistration. With FFTRegistration, we need to choose our reference image first. So we'll click on Select, navigate to our Debayered folder, and then choose, in my case, image number 8. That was the one where the sun was centered up pretty nicely. Now all 240, 350, however many footage you have, should be aligned to this particular image. Next, we'll click on the Add button, make sure again we're in the Debayer directory, and select all of our photos. From here, we need to choose Write Registered Images. That way it actually aligns them and creates a new photo. And for our output directory, we'll click on Select. And inside of our Debayered folder, I've created a new folder called PixAligned. You can call it whatever you want to though. This will help us stay organized. Either way, once you've created a new folder and renamed it, we'll double click on it and save in there. Let's do a quick recap. We've chosen a reference frame, we've loaded in all of our photos, we created a new folder for the aligned images, and we checked the box for Write Registered Images. Then we'll hit OK, and it will now go through and handle everything automatically. When that completes, you'll need to close out of the little temporary image, and if it says, do you want to keep it, just hit no. Now we're ready to continue on with the workflow. The next step is to convert these files to something a bit more usable by Photoshop. For this, we'll go to Script, Batch Processing, Batch Format Conversion. With our batch format conversion loaded up, we can add all of our new aligned images, which we have right here. The output directory, we'll click on the folder icon again, and we'll create another subdirectory, this time called JPEG. And we'll save these in that JPEG folder. For the output extension, we're going to rename this from XISF to JPEG. The sample format needs to be set to 8 bits unsigned integer because these are JPEG files. And that should be all you need to worry about. Then we'll click on OK, and it will begin to convert our XISF photos to JPEGs, which Photoshop can actually utilize. When that's finished, we'll click No, and then we'll take a look in our directory and make sure that all of our photos are there. So we're debayered, pixalign, JPEG. There we go. We now have all of our JPEG images. The only problem is the file names are pretty crazy, right? So that's going to be our next step. We're now going to use Adobe Bridge. If you don't have this, it's a free download, so I'd recommend you get it through Adobe's Creative Cloud app. Anyway, once you get inside of Adobe Bridge, we're going to go to our new JPEG folder, and we're going to look at all of our images. The problem you might have is the naming convention. You might have a long string of text here for the file names. If so, there's a very easy way to fix that. We'll select all of our photos, we'll right-click, and we'll choose Batch Rename. And this is important because we need to have these named in a very specific way for the rest of the workflow. I'm going to call these PixAligned Eclipse. You can call it whatever you want to though, really. And you might have a bunch of other optional things down here. So you just want to remove them with the minus key. All I want is one that says text with whatever text you want, and then a sequence number for the next one. By default, it might have date and time or something, which is useless for us. So change that to sequence number. And because we likely have hundreds of photos, we'll choose 3 digits. Then our number here should be set to 1. And if you look very closely here in the preview, the new file name will now be PixAligned Eclipse 001. And of course, you can always streamline that name if that's too long for your own liking. Anyway, once you've got that figured out, the only other thing to look at is the destination folder. I'm going to rename my photos in the same folder, that's fine. That should be all there is to it. We've got our new file name with the sequence number 3 digits, starting at number 1, and then we'll hit rename. There we go, PixAlign 01 all the way through 351. Now, let's open up these photos into Adobe Photoshop and create our time lapse. For this, we'll go to File, Open, navigate to our directory, and we've got our PixAlign 001. You have to be very careful here though. You only want to click on the very first image and choose Image Sequence. If you select them all, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. So again, click on the very first image, Image Sequence. If for some reason Image Sequence is grayed out, it's probably because your naming convention wasn't accurate and you didn't have 001, 002, etc. Therefore, you might want to go back to Bridge and get that sorted and rename all your photos again. But if you've been following along with me, you'll click on the first image, check the box for Image Sequence, and then hit Open. The frame rate is going to be 24 frames per second. That'll get you a longer time lapse and also won't be quite as smooth, which will actually make it look better, oddly enough. And here we have our time-lapse video, but you probably don't have the timeline at the bottom of the screen. To fix that, go to Window and choose Timeline. And now, once you go to Window Timeline, it should be available down here. The reason we need to do that is because we want to scrub through the photos and make sure they're working as intended. It looks like PixInsight did its job. It's aligned all of the photos, but see how we're getting this kind of like black border right here? We're going to need to crop that out. So for this, we'll use the crop tool on the left. We're going to do 16:9 for our ratio. And then we'll bring this in so we're not going to have any of those cropped edges. And we'll get that sun centered up. When you've got the sun centered up, we'll hit the check mark. And there we go. Now we have a widescreen field of view, which will be perfect for our Eclipse video. But I'm noticing a few problems. If I play this, the sun's actually going the opposite direction. When I was watching this with my own eyes, the sun came down from the top, went through it, and out this way. So we have to make two adjustments before we go any further. We'll go to Edit, Transform, and we need to flip this vertically. This is only for my images though. There's a good chance you won't have to do this, but if you notice things are not moving the right way, this is an easy way to fix it. After we click on Flip Vertical, it asks us to convert to a smart object. That's fine. And let's play this again. Actually, it's probably easier if I just scrub through it. But I noticed another problem now. It's coming out on the right side. It should be coming out on the left. So we need to flip this one more time with Edit, Transform. We flipped it vertically. Now we're going to flip it horizontally. And after we flip it horizontally, it should now be an accurate representation of what I saw. I'm also noticing something happened with our crop, and we're no longer centered up. I'm not sure why. So let's grab the crop tool again and recrop this. And it was probably because I did the flips that must have screwed up the crop. So you're free to recrop it whenever you need to. And that looks a lot better. But if you're watching this video in a dark room, you're probably seeing a lot of weird banding around the sun here. We need to solve that problem with an adjustment layer. If you go to your Adjustments tab, you can either use our curves or levels. I normally prefer the curves though. Then with our curve tool, we'll click on the hand icon. With the hand icon selected, I want to get real close to the sun, click and drag down until the sky goes completely black. Then I want to click on the hand tool again if I need to, that way it's still selected. And we'll click and drag up on the sun so it's not being too dark in the photo. And if this is just giving you trouble, you can always try to use the levels instead. That might be easier for some people. But for me, I prefer using a curve tool. And if you're watching this in a brightly lit room, you probably don't even see what I'm talking about. So you might want to go in a darker room and you'll see the difference between that and that. Pretty shocking difference in terms of the background. While we're at it, maybe your sun color doesn't look that great. Maybe it's kind of bluish and pale. You could always go back to your Adjustments tab and do whatever you want to the video actually. For example, selective color. I can choose that from my list and I can make the sun more or less red, depending on what I want to do. Or I could choose yellows and continue to tweak the colors in the image like so. And I've seen a lot of photos that kind of look like that to start off with. So if you go to your yellows channel, just increase the yellow amount, and that should give you a better looking sun. Feel free to continue doing whatever adjustments you want to the photo, whether that's a curve or brightness, whatever you think looks good. We should now be just about ready to publish this video. I recommend you just scrub through the video timeline one more time and look for any potential problems. I am noticing a bit more banding here around the edge of the sun, so I might need to have one more curve and fix that like so. That should do the trick right there. All right, so we're now ready to render our video and see how it turns out. For this, we'll go to File, Export, Render Video. There's a chance that your size will not be accurate here, so I'd recommend you just mainly change it to 3840 by 2160. That's a 4K resolution, 16:9. The frame rate should be 24 FPS, and then we need to name our video and select a folder for it. So I'll call this, I'm just calling it YouTube tutorial version for today, and then I'll select a folder where I can find it. I'd recommend just putting in the root, because we had so many subfolders we'll probably lose it, but if you put it at the very top, that'll make it easier to find. So right now I'm just in my general directory here. And that's all there is to it. This should be the last step, hopefully. We'll click on render, and then we'll take a look and see how it turned out. All right, Photoshop has now finished rendering our video. Let's go to the directory. We've got it right here, and we'll take a look. That's actually pretty good, all things considered. We've got the full movement there. That looks great. There was something weird, though. There was a random frame that looked like it didn't belong. And overall, if we watch it again, it just looks kind of shaky, doesn't it? So the first thing we need to figure out is where that random frame that doesn't belong is. And then we'll talk about why it looks kind of shaky. So let's go back to our directory where we had the JPEGs. And it's possible one of the photos just didn't get aligned properly, or, well, who knows. I'm going to pause the video real quick and see if I can find it. Actually, I'm just going to take it along with me because I want to show you probably the easiest way to do this is with the blink tool back in PixInsight. We can load up all of our JPEGs here. Okay, the first thing we need to do is turn off the auto STF. That way we're not looking at that. And we'll go through, again, put the FPS or whatever to 0. Click on the play button. And we're just looking for any photos that look odd, because we need to either delete them or manually adjust them. Who knows? We'll find out. Okay, I found it. I'm not sure what happened, but it looks like at least 1 or 2 photos are just way out of line. So they were right there, yeah. Image 200 just did not line up for some reason. That very likely could have been what we saw in the video. I'm going to keep playing through this though and see if there's any others that don't belong. I didn't see anything else, but one thing that might help, this thing is lagging like crazy because we have so many images loaded up. So you might want to just do 50 at a time. That might really help, especially if you have an older computer. Because if you try to load all 350 at once, it really slows things down. I'm going to close everything out though. And now we're going to go back to Photoshop and align that single photo. And while we're doing that, I'm going to show you an alternate way to manually align all of your images if you have to. We're going to start off by going to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. Then we'll click on Browse, navigate to our correct directory with the JPEGs, and we know that image number 200 should be the culprit. You can barely even tell here in the thumbnail that that was the issue, so that's why I wanted to go through Blink and do it that way. But I'm going to select, let's just say 10 photos to give you an idea of how this is going to work. You don't need to do this, but anyway. We'll select 10 photos, including the one that's not aligned. We'll hit OK. I know there's an option here to automatically align the images. Do not do that. It'll probably just make it worse, if anything. All right, so all you have to do is hit OK now. You've loaded in your files. Hit OK. It's going to go through and load up every single image as a new layer here. That way we can align them all ourselves. And because this timeline is getting in the way, we can always close it out. So let's go through this. Image number 200 right here, if I right click on the eyeball and choose Show Hide All Other Layers, we see how it shifts. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to turn on the photo above it that we know is aligned properly. Then I'll go to View and choose Rulers. You want to make sure it's checked. You might already have your rulers, but if you don't, you can make sure there's a check mark next to rulers by clicking on it. You should now have a ruler up top and on the left. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to drag the top ruler down, and then the left ruler, we're going to drag it out. But there's another consideration here. It's going to be hard to line up the sun when we're only seeing part of the eclipse. So let's go back up to File, Open. We're going to grab one of our full photos right here where we see the entire sun. All right, once you've opened up your full sun image, we'll hit Controller-Command-A, Controller-Command-C to copy it. Then we'll paste it as a new layer here, in our stack with Control-Command-V. I'd actually recommend dragging this image all the way to the top. And we're going to use this for our rulers. So again, we'll grab our ruler that we already have right here. We'll drag it up to the top of the sun. This ruler will drag to the left of the sun. We'll grab another ruler from the top. So you click on the ruler, drag it down, place this at the bottom, and then drag out another one from the left and put it right there. We now have the sun perfectly centered up here in our little box. And you can always zoom in and get this as precise as possible, like so. Now what I want you to do actually is turn on all the eyeballs if you need to, and go through here frame by frame. I want you to look and see if your sun is actually centered up in each frame as you turn off the eyeball. You might see that it shifts slightly from the bottom or the left or the right. For example, see right here on this photo there's a little tiny gap, but on this photo it reaches the edge. This photo reaches the edge, this one there's a little bit of a gap. That would explain why in the video it wasn't quite perfectly aligned. It was pretty darn close, but there was something slightly off. So what you could do, if it's not perfect and it's driving you crazy, is you can come in here frame by frame, use the Move tool, and as long as the Move tool is selected, you can now use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move your layer up, down, left, or right. See that? I'm just pressing and holding on my arrow keys. So you can get this aligned to the very bottom of the window, and also make sure it's aligned with your left and right. And in this way, you can perfectly align every single image. As you can imagine, that's very time consuming and very tedious, but that's the way I did it actually. I went through here frame by frame. It took me over 4 hours to do, and I made sure every single photo hit the edges of my box. So I go down, I click on the next photo down. I use the arrow keys to line up the sun. I turn off the eyeball, go to the next one down, use the arrow keys. You can imagine how annoying that is. So I don't really recommend you do that, but this is a very powerful way to do it, thanks to the rulers here in Photoshop. We're getting sidetracked though, so let's just finish this up. Our only problem was image number 200. And now that we have our box, we can just drag image number 200 back up to where it needs to be, like so. And right about there should be good. So that's image number 200. That was the outlier that didn't belong. We can now delete all of our other layers. We don't need them. And we could save this as our photo. So I realize there's kind of this weird background, but that's going to get cropped out anyway. I'm not worried about it. When you've got your 1 or 2 photos that might not be aligned, properly aligned, we'll go to File, Save As, then we'll navigate to our directory, and we have a problem. It's trying to save this as a PSD, and we have no way to change this to a JPEG. So we need to hit Save a Copy instead. When we hit Save a Copy, that now allows us to choose JPEG from the list, and we want to click on whatever image was not aligned. So in my case, that was image number 200. I'll click on it. That replaces the name so we can overwrite it. Then I'll hit Save. I do want to replace it. And there we go. So we have now fixed the one photo that did not belong. We can redo our video now from scratch and have a much better looking time lapse without that glitch. But just to be thorough here before we go do that, again, the problem we had is that the photos were shifting very slightly in terms of a few pixels per image. So I want to show you how you can fix that manually if you've got the time and the will, mainly. Again, we go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. We click on Browse. And you're going to want to do these about 50 at a time. Because if you do any more than 50, it's really going to bog down your computer and it's going to lag like crazy. In some cases, you might only be able to do 25 at a time before it lags, but find what works best for you and make sure you're paying attention. Because you need to make a note that if you went from 1 to 50, then the next time you have to go from 51 to 100. Anyway, once you've got 50 photos selected, we'll hit OK. It's going to load them all up as separate layers, and then we'll hit OK one more time. Now that we have all of our photos loaded up as layers, let's do the same thing with our rulers that I showed you earlier. We'll zoom in, we'll drag down from our top ruler, and place it right here. And there it goes. Then we'll drag out from our left ruler and place it right about there. We'll drag another one from the left and place it right about there. And then another one from the top, right about there. I would recommend that you zoom in and make sure that these are lined up properly, at least on this first photo. And now everything moving forward will be aligned to the very first image. So here's the way this works. If the first photo looks good, we'll turn off the eyeball, go down to the second photo, look it over real close. If you need to, use the arrow keys on your keyboard with the move tool selected and get that lined up. Then you can turn off the eyeball and go down to the next photo. Check the edges, see if anything isn't quite lined up. Turn off that eyeball, go down to the next one. You repeat this until every single photo from all 50 has been aligned. This will take you a while, like I said, but at least PixInsight has done most of the heavy lifting. Because now you're just going to use the arrow keys and move it a few pixels. When I did this, I didn't even know about the PixInsight workflow, and so it took me a lot longer. This might only take you an hour at the most. Anyway, once you've got all of your first 50 images aligned, we need to save them as JPEGs, as separate layers, of course. So the way this works is you go to File, Export, Layers to Files. With our layers to files, we're going to choose our destination. And what I've done is I've gone to my JPEG folder where we have pretty much everything aligned already. I'm going to create a subfolder here though called Manually Aligned. And this will help us stay organized. So we'll save everything now in our manually aligned folder. The file name prefix, I'm going to delete that actually because that might just cause problems. Make sure you are saving this as JPEG. Quality of 9 should be fine. And then let's give this a try. It looked like that worked, but we have another issue now. The file naming is just completely crazy. We won't worry about it for now, but this is where we'll need to use Adobe Bridge and rename our photos at the end. But at least all 50 photos are now here. Once you've completed this first set of images, then we need to go back and do that all over again. So here's what I'd recommend. Go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. We'll click on Browse, and now we'll grab the next set of images. So if we went 1 through 50, we'll do 51 through 100. We'll open them up, then we'll hit OK. And when Photoshop has loaded up all of your new set of layers, we need to actually get them back in this workspace with our rulers. That way we know everything is still being aligned to the same exact spot. So what I recommend is you go back to your image number 1 all the way through image like 49 and then delete all of those layers. You should now just have one layer. Then go back to your new series of images, select all of them, in my case 50 through 100, or rather 51 through 100. We'll hit Control-Command-C to copy all of those layers. And then we're going to paste them right here with Control-Command-V. And that worked perfectly. I would recommend that you grab number 50 here, drag it all the way to the top. And because we've already aligned 50 and we've saved it, we do not want to include it again here. That will screw things up. So make sure you delete whatever leftover layers you might have, in my case just 50. And now we're going to start that whole process over again. We'll zoom in. We'll go from image 51, we'll use our move tool and line it up properly. Image 52, image 53, etc. When that completes, you do the same exact thing. File, export to layers, or rather layers to files, save those in the same directory. Keep repeating these steps until you've made it through all of your photos, and then finally we can redo our video and call it a day. So I'm just going to cut right to the chase because I've already got everything more or less lined up. Alright, we have to do one more thing I forgot. You can see just how convoluted this whole thing is, but it should hopefully be worth it in the end. We need to use Bridge and rename our photos, as I noted, because the file naming is kind of weird. So we'll go to the manually aligned folder, select all 350 images in your case, right click, and then choose Batch Rename. We've already done this, but we have to do it again. Make sure you reset the numbering scheme to 1. And we can rename this as well to like manually aligned. Everything else should be good from before. Again, just verify you are changing the number back to 1. Hit rename. There we go, that looks a lot better. Now we have 1 through 50 in my case. In your case, you'd have upwards of 350 potentially. Finally, let's create our video. For this, we'll go back to Photoshop, File, Open. Grab all of our images now that we know are manually aligned. Actually, I almost did the same mistake that I warned you not to do. We get so ahead of ourselves here. Make sure you just click on the first photo and choose Image Sequence. You gotta remember you do that. I almost forgot. But there we go. We click on Image 1, Image Sequence. I know I'm not in the right folder, but just bear with me. There's a lot going on here. And our frame rate's gonna be 24 FPS. We're gonna have to repeat those steps that I showed you before, so very quickly I'm just gonna do this real fast. There we go. Then we need to edit our photo, transform it horizontally. And the reason it gave me an error there, when I tried to transform it, it's giving us this weird little error. It's because I'm on my curves layer. This is something that might throw you off as well. You have to be on your actual video layer. And now we can transform it. We can do that vertically as well. I'm going through this fast because I've already shown you all this. Then we'll use the crop tool, get that sun centered up nicely. And if you want to see your timeline, remember it's under Window, Timeline. I'd recommend you scrub through the video one last time, look for any potential problems. If you're happy though, and I'm almost happy, there we go, we can now finally export our final version with File, Export, Render Video. Everything should still be set from before. I'm going to call this fixed version because we fixed the sun. And then we'll render this one. Hopefully this is now the end of the video. Let's take a look. If this looks good, I think we're going to call it. We have our fixed version here. I didn't go through and manually align everything. I did that on another video. So I'm just making sure that one photo doesn't jump. That looks fine. Perfect. There we go. So that's going to conclude my full-length annular eclipse tutorial video. And just to show you the difference, here is the images that I aligned manually frame by frame, which took me over 4 hours. I'll do them side by side so you can see how much smoother that one is, although it's still not quite perfect. And that's all I've got for you in today's video. So my final thought would be, maybe we didn't have that many photos. Well, looking ahead, we do have the total eclipse coming up in April. That will complicate things because you'll have to remove the solar filter in the middle of everything, and that might really throw off the time-lapse abilities. But we'll think it through as we get closer and see if that's going to be feasible or not. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in another video.